Happy Monday. I'm like, fingers crossed that my audio has no problems, that my internet connection has no problems.
You sound good so far.
Woohoo! It's good to see everyone today. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
I'm super excited to be here.
Me too. So we'll wait 2 more minutes and we'll start right at 5, just to give the rest of our group a chance to get in. Let's test everyone's audio. Terry, everyone is say unmute and just say hello so we know your audio is working. Jen,
Hello.
yours worked.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Terry, I can hear you. Monica, I can hear you. Great. Awesome. Nice t-shirt, Monica. Yay. I love it.
I feel so lucky to get to spend an hour with all my friends.
That's right. So we're just missing a couple more people. We've got Asha, Paul. There she is, Stephanie. Still joining us. All right. Hi, Asha.
Hello, hello. How are y'all?
Great. How are you?
Doing well. And lots of faces I haven't seen in a while. Hello, Teresa. Hello, Monica.
Yes,
and then familiar ones. Hello there, Jen.
Hi.
And then Dr. Wendy. That's a new face. Hello, hello. Hello.
Yay to new friends. So we are streaming live on Facebook. Exciting. We're going to wait 1 more minute and then we're going to get started tonight. SA Startup Week /month. We're excited about tonight's conversation, innovation in education towards liberation and justice. Awesome panel, great leaders. We'll get started here shortly. Streaming live, awesome. See if I can do a watch party. Okay, I feel so high tech. Doing a watch party on my cell phone. We're streaming live on Facebook. We have so many great faces. We have 2 leaders that are going to join us shortly. They are running a little bit late, and we are going to send them a ton of grace and a ton of love, because if there is anything that is not easy about running a school, on top of that, running a school on a pandemic, it's being a teacher and a school leader right now. So we are super excited to be together tonight. This is San Antonio Startup Week. We're excited to be on the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Startup track. My name is Dalia Contreras. I get the honor, privilege of serving as the interim CEO for City Education Partners. City Education Partners is a nonprofit organization in San Antonio focused on ensuring that one day every child is in a high-quality school that's going to allow them to courageously chase their dreams and live a joy-filled and choice-filled life. And we're really excited to have this panel of amazing leaders who are focused on just that, ensuring that students have a wonderful education experience that is whole-rounded, that is fully rounded, that is all about investing in every single element of them, and ensuring that they are set up to just live really amazing choice-filled lives according to their own hopes, desires, and dreams. I'm really excited to have Jen Maestas moderating tonight's panel, and then she is going to introduce all of these amazing leaders. Jen, I could tell you a million things I love about Jen. I mean, Jen comes into a room, her heart just wraps you up, her smile just makes you smile. She's phenomenal. Jen has 25 years of experience in education, both as a teacher and a leader in SAISD here in San Antonio. Jen is also so cool. She's the Miss Education podcast leader. I'm sure if you've not tuned into Miss Education podcast, you need to. So many great episodes on San Antonio education. And then I also have, the distinct honor, privilege, and pleasure of getting to work with Jen at City Education Partners. She is our innovative school design coach. And so she gets to coach all of our leaders who are really looking to create innovative school models in education for San Antonio. What we know about education is that education was not built originally for every child to be successful. We know that. We know that this system is not broken. We know that the original system is designed to do what it was designed to do, which was ensure that if you are a white child, you have the best outcomes. And if you're a child of color, you have, less and less outcomes. If you're a Black child in the American school system, then you have typically the worst outcomes. These leaders care about creating equity and justice towards liberation and education and changing that, building a system that doesn't deliver that, that's not intended for that, building a system that actually allows every child to live choice-filled lives. So we're excited to elevate that conversation tonight. Jen, thank you so much for being willing to host and to moderate panelists. Thank you so much after an incredibly challenging, rewarding day that you would close out with this evening's conversation. So without further ado, Jen, I'm passing it over.
Thanks, Dalia. Oh my God, can you just follow me around to all of my Zoom calls and do that intro every single time? Because that was awesome. I want to believe everything he said. So thank you. Thanks. I am so excited. I was saying earlier before we started, I feel so lucky to get to sit down and just be with my friends for an hour at the end of my workday. I count you all as friends, and I am just in awe of the work that each one of you does every day. So thanks for letting me be a little piece of that story. And stories are really where it's at, right? Like if we don't tell our story, then we're missing a huge part. And so is everybody else. I get to be married to Carlos, who is the chief story smith in my life. And he is constantly reminding me that there's power in your story. And so I carry that around with me. And I wanted to kick today's panel off with each one of your innovation stories. So like how in the world do you come to the conclusion that you want to start a new school? I think starting a new school is just such a big idea. And it's one that isn't like super popular yet, although I hear more and more about it all of the time. I think, if you grew up like me in a traditional ISD system, schools were already schools, and you just get to be a part of it. And you guys are doing something really different in starting a new school. And Wendy, a new school in the middle of a pandemic, so more power to you. So I'm going to kick it off around, and I'll just go kind of in order the way you are on my screen, but tell us your innovation story. What got you started? Why did you decide to start a new school? Why this new school, and why right now? So Monica, you want to kick us off? And also, hi.
Hi. Oh gosh. So thank you. Yes, definitely among friends. I really appreciate you inviting me to the table. So why Las Palmas Leadership School for Girls? So we are in Edgewood. We are transforming from a traditional public pre-K 5 to a kinder through 8th grade. And so we currently serve 88 kinder through 2nd grade girls. So we are growing each day. We went from 55 to 88 now. So, earlier when you started about stories, whose story is being told and whose story is left out. And so in our community and talking to our families over the past 2 years, female leader stories are left out. And so we wanted to not school, we wanted to educate differently. And so we are in a school system. And so how do we start to educate differently so that when girls do leave our system in 9 years, they have a story that they're telling, they have voice that they can definitely see how to change and do things differently, and they leave empowered. And so part of our model is a feminist framework, and I'm constantly asked is, well, what curriculum, where is that? No, it's not about a purchased curriculum, right? It is about the community you're serving, who are the female leaders in our community, who are in the San Antonio area, and bringing and designing together. So it's not a curriculum we go purchase. it's us being intentional about the leaders that our girls are hearing. It is them knowing that another person, another female has a story to tell and you can connect. So that is really our why our families have been empowered and wanted the change. They also wanted a school that went all the way up to 8th grade. If they constantly tell me, can you keep them till 12th grade? You know, and so we're like a little at a time, but that's the other piece of to be able to really create change is to be able to keep them longer with us. And so to really see them transform, we're designed to be a small community school so that we can really know each of our girls at a personal level and at a leadership level. So excited to be here, but that's our model.
Thanks, Monica. I'm excited for you. It's really cool to see it all coming into reality. Terry, how about you? Why now? Why here? Why your school?
Thanks for the invite again, Dalia and Jen. And yes, again, just to echo what Monica said, just really excited to be here with you all tonight. This is my 23rd year in the Edgewood ISD. All of my life has been in Edgewood. It's where I grew up. And so why innovation? Why at Fidelis Elementary? Really, this journey began for me about 5 years ago when I became the principal at Fidelis Elementary. I walked into a campus that had a great staff. They loved kids, but we were struggling to meet those learning outcomes that our kids deserved. And so this conversation really began out of this thought of what does it mean to bring equity to Fidelis Elementary. You know, equity is not about everything's the same. It's not about what's fair. It is about getting those breakthrough results for kids because that's what our community deserves. And so that's where the conversation began. And so we started to pitch ideas to our community and what was it that they were really interested in and passionate about. And so we have launched the Fidelis Ace Model. It is the Accelerating Campus Excellence. It's the first ACE model in San Antonio at an elementary school. And so really it's focused on bringing high quality teachers that have these breakthrough results for kids, and really trying to build a strong culture around academic excellence and equity. On top of that, then we really are looking at the STEAM model. So we fall within the STEAM innovation zone in Edgewood. And so Dr. Hernandez and his 5-year plan includes different innovation zones around Edgewood, and our campus falls within that feeder. So we're really excited to be a part of that. Things like maker spaces and outdoor learning environments that are really focused around STEAM learning are really what sets us apart, you know, from other campuses in the area. So again, just really where this stems from is a need for us to get kids what it is that they deserve and set them on the pathway for life, and gives them that opportunity to be able to join the workforce, get into the college of choice. Like Dalia said, right, it's about giving kids access and choice, and really powering them up for what comes next in their lives. So thanks again for having us here tonight.
Thank you for being here. Dr. Fuller, your turn.
Hi guys, I just want to say thank you for the invite. I came across the CAS lead opportunity and working with the CAS network because my hometown school district of East Central decided that they wanted to offer this unique opportunity to students. And it's unique in the fact that the actual school is in my old elementary. So walking these halls bring back a lot of memories. And I thought, God, what an innovative, come full circle, look what I did. And now I want to pass this on, you know, to all students. But I think what intrigued me the most is I didn't know about the opportunity until a colleague of mine said, hey, I saw this you need to look into it, Wendy. And so I did. And the more I researched, the more I was just like, wow, this is such an amazing opportunity to offer students, but also to design a school with students in mind. So taking a year to work with industry, other principals across districts, just really designing PBL learning, authentic opportunities and experiences for students up front. So it's not already in the works, but we're really designing with the student in mind. And being the fourth cast high school, there's 5 in all, but we're the fourth cast lead, offers leadership opportunities in retail management, hospitality, and tourism management, and e-commerce, which are all industries that are going to really strive for our students after this, the pandemic and everything. So I think what's unique about CAST is they're connecting students up front early on with industry partners founded in student strengths, what they're interested in, what they're passionate about, and really making those connections early on so that they can achieve college or go where they want to go work and do whatever their heart desires. And I think that just really makes for a well-rounded, equal opportunity for all students. So thanks for having me today.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. Asha, tell us your story.
Yes, thank you. So hello to each of you. Lovely to just get to share space with so many of you, even if it's virtual. And so I'm Asha. I'm one of the co-founders and co-leaders of The Gathering Place. We are a new school that opened up this fall. We planned for many curveballs, not a pandemic, but here we are. After a 3.5-year journey of startup. We are a school that's focused on art and on social justice, and we believe in our mission, which is to see and celebrate and nurture the inner brilliance within every single child. One of the biggest whys, I think there's so many, but I think one of the biggest whys is recognizing that each of our kids has such inner genius that is most often stifled in schools. We often tell our kids, and that's whether through words or through the role models that we showcase or through requirements of what post-high school should look like, we impose boxes onto our children in a way that doesn't actually celebrate or magnify or amplify just the beauty and the brilliance inside of each of them. And so one of our driving beliefs is, how do we create the space where we listen to kids, where we support our kids as they pursue their dreams, as they pursue who they are authentically, with the beauty that they have for the entire world and for and within their own communities. And so that's one of the big whys. Our second big why is the recognition that we live in a world, and our school systems most often just perpetuate continued inequity and continued prejudice. Dismantling a system is one thing, and rebuilding it is a totally other experience. And I would describe, at least from the schools that I had gone to, the schools that I had worked in, many of the training programs that are around for our educators, is very often you're actually trained to never question the system. And if you ever do question the system, it's only to dismantle it, and there's no active rebuilding of it. And so our second big why is, how do we dismantle and rebuild what school could look like? And it's not us doing that work, it's our kids. And so how do we create the space? How do we push the boundaries? How do we remove as many of those cages and imposed requirements on our kids so that our kids could actually build a school and build multiple schools and communities that they actually want to be in? Because very often our kiddos, you see the light and their love for school diminish with each passing year in school. And so that's the other like final piece of the why, is the like commitment to social justice and creating the space for kids to rebuild a world that we have never yet experienced.
Thanks, Asha. Stephanie, how are you tonight? Thanks for being here.
Thank you. The hustle and bustle and the craziness of starting a school in a pandemic, Asha knows firsthand. So my name is Stephanie Hall Powell, and I am the leader here at SA Prep, or we call it SA Prep, but it's San Antonio Preparatory. And our why is really, for me, it's really personal in the sense of like, what was my educational experience like when I was a Black child, a Black girl, as a Black woman, as a Black mother, and then as a Black educator, and the inequities that I experienced in my own life, the inequities that my sons have experienced as a Black mother, and then the inequities I've seen as a Black educator, and how I really, really, really wanted San Antonio Prep to look and feel very different from school that kids go attend right now. And so our ultimate goal was not only just to educate, but really to change the educational experience for Brown and Black children, because they hate school. The bottom line is, you ask any child of color, you know, do they like their school? They might say that they like learning. They may say that they like their teachers, but they never really say that they like school in general. And so what we really hoped to do at San Antonio Prep was really change how it looked and how it felt. And so to walk into your classrooms and see Black leaders on the wall, or to walk into a building and see Brown and Black people walking down the hallways, and those are your teachers, and those are your counselors, and those are your principals, and those are the people that you interact with on a daily basis, that look just like you and had some of the same experiences as you when they were your age. So not only now do I look like you, but I can relate to you, and I can have conversations with you where I understand your struggle, and I understand where you're coming from, and I understand how to talk to you, and I understand how to talk to your mom and your grandma and everyone else. And it's like a family unit. Some of the pieces that we added into San Antonio Prep that's unique to the city is that we have 2 teachers in our classroom, and it's not a teacher co-teacher, it's actually two teachers in our classroom. So one teacher teaches math and science, and the other one ELA and social studies. And the idea was around support. And in or not as much to have. What we tried to build was a school and a classroom where I might be cutting up. I think my internet is a little unstable, where our kids are truly, truly supported by as many adults as we can. So when one teacher is teaching, the other one is supporting. And so that child never gets left behind. The child is always seen, always heard, always valued, always knows that someone's watching, someone loves them, someone is speaking to them, someone is valuing them, someone is watching them. Like, that is always happening in our classrooms and in our hallways and wherever they are. And so for me, San Antonio Prep is really personal in the sense that I created this school for someone like me when I was a little girl. So now when my sons attend, because all of my sons attend San Antonio Prep, except for my oldest, who goes to Compass Rose with Paul. And I created the school for me and my kids, and what I would want for myself and my own children. And now I see how much my families value the personal mother perspective that I bring to education, and not just educational jargon or just educational values, but like what type of motherly values I bring to the campus. And so that is my why, that we continue to evolve every day, every month, that we're here, things that we learn from our families, that we learn from our kids, that we learn from our teachers. And so maybe some initial visions that we had when we wrote our charter, we may not necessarily implement. But the thing that I love about being an independent new charter is that we get to define what success looks like for us. And we get to make something great for our community, especially that's specific to the community that we serve.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thanks for sharing your time with us. Hey, Paul, you're up.
Hey, it's good to see everyone. Sorry I was a bit late, traffic. Really, really happy to be here. The why for Compass Rose. So I'm Paul Morrissey. I'm the founder and CEO of Compass Rose, a network of public charter schools here in San Antonio. And you know, as I was listening to all of you speaking, I was nodding vigorously because the stories, I think, are so similar, right? We all saw a gap that we wanted to fill. Our gap sound really, really similar. For me, it was there are a couple of reasons, but one is like at Compass Rose, our mission is to put every student on the pathway to a bright future. Really simple mission, really tough to do in the way schools have traditionally been set up for kids. We've seen schools and education act like a map more often, but we believe, and this is going to tie in our name here, we believe kids need a compass, not a map, right? Like we want to prepare students for that bright future. We want them to be able to build their dreams. Every child has big dreams. Families have big dreams for their children. We want our children to achieve those dreams, and we think that schools should be pointing children in the direction of their dreams. We don't need to tell them what those dreams are. We need to make those dreams possible. So that is the reason for being, is to make all of our students' dreams possible. And in so doing, like we think that there were a couple of like big gaps in the education system that really sort of spurred on the inception of Compass Rose. And one was that I've spent time in my career in both districts and in charters, and I've been a teacher, I've been a school leader, I've been a network level leader in both of those types of schools. And across the board, what I heard more and more was that decisions were being made that were centered on adults first, and then how that decision then was like sort of somehow like impacting students. And I just got so frustrated with that. I was like, we're all in education for kids. And so I wanted to build a school where the first conversations we have is centered on students. How do we ensure that our students are able to access their dreams, and that we make anything possible for them? And then the second was, I have notes here. That schools, there you go. From my perspective, schools in both areas, both types of schools, sort of just existed in the neighborhoods that they sort of were in, and that they weren't built and designed to create or produce graduates that community really wanted to see. So from my perspective, when building a network of schools, several schools, it was really important that each of those schools took on a different identity, and an identity that matched the community's desires for its graduates and what the community wanted. And this was like made super clear from the get-go for me when it wasn't very long ago, it was 3 years ago, I was standing in parking lots handing out flyers, just trying to get anyone to come to my school, it was you all know the grind. But like standing in that parking lot, I had this great tagline. I was like, we're Compass Rose. We are a high-tech college prep school. And I was like, that's awesome. It sounds good. I can make it fun, but I didn't really know what that meant. And what does that mean to an adult, to a parent, like high-tech college prep, like whatever. And the more that I would talk to families, the more I realized like that was as hollow to them as it seemed to me. And I heard, on our campus down at Brooks, again and again, oh, whatever, I don't really care about that. What I want is for my child to be his own boss. I don't want my daughter to ever have to answer to anyone. I want them to be like their uncle or their aunt who own their own business. And I thought, oh my gosh, like that's a way better idea than what I had come up with. Like, why don't I teach these kids? We could do that. We can teach these kids to be entrepreneurs. So our campus took on the image of what its community wanted just by me listening to what folks were saying. So that became a rallying cry. Like, we have to listen to our communities. We have to build schools that reflect the desires of the community, that don't just exist within those communities. So that is the driving impetus of our work now, is to build schools and to grow schools that produce graduates that the community wants to see, and that elevates the best parts of the community, or what the community sees as the best parts of themselves. That's us.
Yeah, thank you. That's awesome. I think you pulled together a couple of things that I heard everybody saying, which is number one, we got to authentically listen and create spaces where people can authentically share, right? And then number two, once we've listened, recognize what it is that the community wants, and then do a combo move of dismantling and rebuilding, which honestly, I feel like the word dismantle I hear way more often than rebuild. So thanks, Asha, for bringing that up. I think, and then provide a lot of support, both for parents and for the educators that are doing the work, and for our students. Some things that I think are not typical to me are equating educators with entrepreneurs, or equating schools with startups. Like, those things seem as though they're in juxtaposition to each other, but this group would suggest something totally different. I think all of you are like very entrepreneurial, and you saw a gap, and you're working to fill the gap in a startup mode. And I know that there have been obstacles to that work. So I'm curious about, like, and this is like an open question, anyone can jump in. We don't have to go round robin on this one. What have been some of your greatest obstacles, either internal obstacles or external obstacles, as you start to craft this new vision of the way school could or should look? Don't be shy about the obstacles. I know you're lying. I was there.
I'll go, Jen. I think exactly what you just said, the entrepreneurial piece. So I definitely, starting this journey, the internal conflict was the risk taker. You know, even when you hear the word innovation, I would not have ever labeled or saw myself as an innovation. You know, 24 years of education, and I only work in an ISD. So in a system that has how you do things, right? You're a teacher, then you're a coach, and then you're an AP. And so I just kept following, right? And trying my best to do my best within the structure. And so when started listening to families and what they wanted and having dialogue and conversation, I would have never like, oh no, I'm not innovative. I'm not an entrepreneur. I don't, you know. And so even those labels were hard for me to identify and put myself in that. And I think the internal was the risk taking, because I didn't know, right? You know, and you're listening and you're trying to build as you go and create. And so still to this day, the internal struggle is, do I belong in this seat? You know, leading an all-girls school and families believing in you and teachers. And sometimes I'm like, I don't know, maybe someone else is more qualified for this. So that internal struggle, but then I have the skill set to listen or talk to others and then shut that little internal voice down and do the work that needs to happen. And so that's part of what we're trying to do at our school is we don't share stories. We don't talk. People see us and they see, oh my gosh, you have everything's perfect and everything is figured out, right? And so trying to understand identity and unpacking that. And so the external struggle was I do work in an independent school district. And so we are not a charter school. So we are still trying to navigate the space between the district and the innovation of the change that you're trying to make happen, right? And so I've learned to operate in a political space that I had not done before. And so I often share that, you know, the other day I'm like, I'm in my mid 40s and I'm still finding my voice. And so when I can say that and make those connections with others, they're the same thing, right? Like we're all still just trying to figure it out. And am I going to get it wrong? Yes, because I should, because I don't want to operate in this safe space anymore. And so I'm definitely liberated. I know our teachers are liberated, our students and our community. So just in the past, you know, it feels like a year, but just in the past 10 weeks that we've been operating, it's just a total transformation at our campus. So those were the internal and external for me.
Yeah, I'll hop in next. One of my reflections and just like recognitions is on the word innovation. I would argue that it's such a popular word. Everybody wants schools to be innovative and they want to see innovation and they're terrified of innovation. No one actually wants innovation. I would argue that like most people want iteration. So they want to see things that they are already familiar with get strengthened. And they want to celebrate how it's been strengthened, and that because it feels novel and because it feels newer and now it's working differently than before and more effectively, that's what's tagged as innovation, but that's not actually innovation. That is solely iteration. And so I would argue that most people, organizations, folks in education, teachers, leaders, folks supporting education, philanthropists, different advocacy groups, caregivers. Everyone claims they want innovation, but they're very scared of it, or they don't actually want it. And so a couple of examples of this, even like Monica, one of the things that you were describing the first time that you were sharing out was folks asking like, and so what prepackaged curriculum are you using? And you're like, well, we're not, because we're writing it. It's like a feminist curriculum. That's not something you like go online and go purchase and then just go implement. It doesn't exist. Like that is an innovation, and that's very scary. Because if somebody asks like, well, I would like to see all the peer-reviewed research that this already works. Well, that's not innovation. That's not new. That's not radical. That's not pioneering. That's not pushing the edge. That's not dismantling anything, because it already exists. I remember sitting down and having a conversation with like a philanthropist who really wanted to see education change. And really believe that there is a world beyond a standardized test, that we could really rewrite what success looks like for children and where children can co-create that definition. And their first metric in their awarded grants was, how do children do on the STAR? And so you have, on one hand, we want innovation, we want to see something different, but we're going to use all the definitions of current approaches to education that we claim that we don't want anymore, but we're going to impose that on any future innovation. I think there's also a component of, we want something different. And then when you see something different, the most frequent critiques are like, but can we do something that we're really familiar with? We don't actually like the outcomes of that, but we're used to it. And so I think to the question, I think one of like the external components is navigating the fear around innovation, is navigating the skepticism, the disbelief, and the lack of buy-in for innovation, because you are constantly overcoming fear, and you're constantly overcoming just cynicism that a different system, a different approach, a different philosophy could work, even though folks agree that the current one is not working. And so I would say that like externally, I think that's one of the most fascinating and one of like the biggest difficulties is you constantly find yourself in conversations where you're like, let's actually compare and contrast iteration to innovation. And what does that mean for our work? And then how do you like protect that space for, like we'll often say like, we actually want kids to co-create something. Our education system has not been co-created. And so like repeating our current practices is not going to result in like a co-created system. Repeating our current systems and Paul, to like to one of your big missions of like wanting and hoping and creating the space for kids to be entrepreneurs. Our kids historically have not been entrepreneurs, and so we can't repeat the system, which is what Compassers is doing, is not repeating the system. And so I think there's like on the external side, there's a big component of what does it look like to constantly like run into a wall and have the stamina to be like, that's cool, I'm gonna keep going. We're gonna have these conversations over and over and over again. Come see our work. And then I think on the internal side, there's the balance. One of the phrases we often say at the gathering place is like, education is heart work and hard work. Is I think it's a like continuous. It's continuous work that requires a lot of fuel and a lot of conviction and a lot of belief that there could be something different, even as like most external forces are pushing you to be as like typical or as common as possible. And you constantly need to be like pushing against that to be like, no, there's a different way. Let's go build that into reality. And so that's like the internal piece.
Definitely. You reminded me of something I read that said the best thing about being an educator is that it matters so much. And the hardest thing about being an educator is that it matters so much. And you are in a constant ebb and flow of like what's trendy and what you know is good for kids, and what's measurable and what you know is good for kids or teachers even at that. So I totally get that, Asha. Anybody else have anything to add on the obstacle side?
I'll jump in and connected to what others have said, and going back to Stephanie's comment earlier about, my personal identity and my identity markers, and me identifying as a Mexican American, a girl from the South Side, like the ways that I was raised, right? Like the pedagogies of the home, and the way that I choose to lead, just like as a person, just as a human being, right? And how that conflicts with a professional identity, right? Where you are measured up against what someone else, wants you to believe is a high performing principal or a high performing leader. And so I think those conflicts, right, cause you to think about, like Monica said, like, do I belong here, right? Like imposter syndrome kicks in, and those kinds of things. And so it's like having to overcome that. So I think it's a lot of internal work that has been done, right, when you're doing something new. And really, I go back to something that Dalia shared with us about the first revolution begins within, right? So it's a lot of that inner working and unpacking the wounds, right, of like childhood or your schooling experience, or what you've experienced as an educator, and really thinking about, like, how do we unpack it to put it back together? And like, what a better time to do that than in the midst of a pandemic, right? Because you're having to deconstruct everything you knew about education, and you're trying to rebuild that, right, in this new space. So I think that internal barriers are real, right, and they present themselves and they manifest themselves in different ways, in different spaces. But I think where I am today in comparison to where I was just a year ago, I think that definitely that the skill sets continue to be lifted and built up, and certainly amongst people who are challenging your thinking, right? Being able to be amongst other leaders who are walking the same journey, and we know I'm not going to get it right every day. And so then how do I focus on making that leadership so that I can make tomorrow better than it was, today, and so forth. So.
For sure. And I feel like even having this network of educators who are starting schools and who are thinking the way that you're thinking is so empowering and impactful. I didn't know that this existed in San Antonio 3 years ago. And I know that I'm not the only person who didn't know that, but that was an obstacle all on its own, is just not knowing that this is happening around you, because you sort of get tunnel vision when you're leading a campus, or when you're a teacher, you see what's right in front of you and you're attacking the problems that are right in front of you. And so I want to reiterate that you sharing your stories tonight and what your obstacles are is really, really it's a big deal, and I'm thankful to be sitting here with you. Were you going to say something, Paul?
Yeah, I was going to talk about an external obstacle real quick. I mean, I think it's when, I don't know, because I'm not a non-educator, but I imagine non-educators think school's open, kids show up. One of the most humbling moments of my life that will stick with me forever was after doing all that, like glad handing, door knocking, hustle in the parking lot of Walmart, trying to get parents to listen to me and to believe in me enough to send their kid to my school when I didn't have a building to show them, when I didn't have anything but my good word, which, take it or leave it, I guess, at that point for them. One of the most humbling moments was the night before day one of school. And I was lying in bed with Nicole, my wife, and I just said, I don't know, we can still leave. We can still run away and move. I don't know if anyone's going to show up tomorrow. I have no idea. We did all the work. We put together all the plans. We created this thing. And then, it's up to parents to trust in that vision, to trust in you as the founder. It was incredibly humbling and scary, and so scary. And I don't know that there's anything else that compares to that. It is the most entrepreneurial feeling, just being out there. We've put it all into it. It's work of the heart, Asha. I've thrown it all into it, and parents are either, and kids are either gonna go for it or they're not. And it is very stark, right? Like it's very black and white. Either people want to go to your school or they do not want to go to your school. And that moment for me was such a humbling moment of thinking like, wow, this is really important work, but it's really scary work at the same time. That was a big external obstacle. To my wife's great credit, she said, no, we won't run away. We'll face up to it. I'm like, okay. And it's worked out so far.
Yeah, I'm glad it's worked out. That's awesome. I am wondering too, you know, like when I think about starting schools and I think about everything you've mentioned about being student-centric and community-centric and thinking through the obstacles that present themselves for our students and for large groups of marginalized students and working through those solutions. I'm wondering, I mean, usually because we typically inherit the school, the staff, the students, this might be an afterthought, right? Like setting up structures and practices that include thought on diversity, equity, inclusion can sometimes become an afterthought. For you guys, you've made it at the forefront of your work. How do you go about doing that? How do you make that a priority from the onset instead of having it something you think about along the way?
I can start.
Oh, go ahead, Stephanie.
I think for me, it was obviously just being a Black woman and already having lived inequities. And so already knowing what I did not want to see on my campus and what I did want to see. And then creating our core values of love, equity, identity, culture, connections, and community. And because those core values lived in every decision that we made, then every decision that we made always included what we are going to make sure that our children experience as young brown and Black children. So for us, it's not an afterthought. It is the thought. It is in every single decision that we make because we designed our school for brown and Black children. So it had to be in the forethought of every decision that we made for our children. We currently sit at 74% of African Americans on our campus, which is the largest percentage in the city. And so like you cannot start a school that's for all children because we have all children on our campus, but designed specifically for low-income minority children, and that be an afterthought of like, how do we make sure that the curriculum is culturally responsive? How do we make sure that we hire where our teachers are culturally responsive, but also look like our children? Like that can't be an afterthought when you're creating a school that's designed specifically for this niche of children.
Thank you. Wendy, were you going to add?
Yeah, I was going to say, I love what you said, Stephanie, because even in hiring teachers, if I could see through their eyes and we could design student experiences where we could teach them to lift up their voice and use their voice, where it was very student-led and based on their strengths, and let teachers teach with that in mind, you know, where we're designing unique experiences holistically. So my teachers taught for an entire week on social emotional learning and how to just get back into school and how they were doing and just everything about them. They were the forefront of what teachers designed, and teachers were like, thank you for allowing us. And I'm thinking to myself, you know, like you guys were saying, all these obstacles, is this going to work? You know, because in theory, yes, we should be taking care of kids on the forefront so that they can get these experiences. Because I had limited experiences growing up in a very, very poor family. And so I thought, okay, how can I make this different, you know, than what they've ever experienced before, but actually being, you know, empathetic and learning. And I mean, some of these families are still having difficulties that they're going through. So I think when we decide to let students guide what they want to learn, and we, like you said, design with that approach in mind, it just, you know, I had a student today talking to future 8th graders, could be incoming 9th graders for next year. And what she was saying confirmed that everything we were doing is on the right track. You know, she was like, my teachers listen to me. They care about my well-being. They want me to achieve my goals and they're going to help me get there. And to hear that really solidified that what I'm doing is the right work, you know, kind of, you know, against what every other comprehensive model should tell us, but it just really solidified that. So.
That's awesome. Go ahead.
I think for us, about 2 years ago, we heard a phrase, and the phrase was like operationalizing DEI. And I heard that and I was like, I don't get this phrase. Like what is operationalizing DEI actually mean? And so that became like a journey that I just grappled with. And one of the big pieces that came out of it was recognizing that holding strong beliefs or holding strong convictions when you are a systems leader is not enough. You have to intentionally and thoughtfully like excavate, examine, audit every single institutional practice, system, routine, procedure within an organization. Because if it's not so like critically analyzed, you often perpetuate our status quo, and our status quo is one of inequity. And so that just completely made me like shift how I think about the work of a school leader, of a school founder. And then it became a question of, and so how does everything get rebuilt? What are the pieces that are co-created? What are the pieces that get drafted, that get piloted, then we get feedback, and then we edit and iterate on it? And then just like, how does our organization in every cell of its being stand for the type of world that we are hoping that we're building towards? And so say, for example, even something like a student handbook. So very often when you're starting a school, and actually very often in education, there's like a phrase of like, don't reinvent the wheel. And we found ourselves like reinventing the wheel pretty much across the board, because anything we would touch was like reflective of a system that we don't believe in and of a world that we don't want to contribute to. And so we had to like rewrite our entire student handbook, like word for word for word. Things like even taking something like a student dress code. Like our belief is that most student dress codes are the ones that we've seen are inherently both like racist and sexist. And so what does it look like to create norms in a school around clothing and question like if there are any? That became its own conversation to explore that don't perpetuate the very things that we want to deconstruct. And so like that became its own journey. Another journey actually happened around talent, which was like my phrase for this is like, we go there at the gathering place. It's like, we want to hear the beliefs, we want to excavate deep, we want to ask the questions. Very often our candidates, as well as our like staff, are like, oh, I've never been asked this in a workplace. And so like, so we go there. So for example, we completely wrote our entire talent system from start to finish internally. And even our like initial application for the gathering place, each of the questions is crafted to excavate beliefs around race, ethnicity, gender, inclusion. And it's heartbreaking, like how revealing those questions are. So we had a really, really high response to our application. So we were hiring for about 45 roles. And we had over 2,700 people apply. So like a really high quantity, 95% were local here in San Antonio. And you'll like touch a resume, and a resume, it's like accolade after accolade, folks with decades of experience, top leadership positions. You read cover letters, they're phenomenal. And then you go to a question asking about the discipline rates here in Bexar County that disproportionately affect Black and Brown students, and you ask why. And the answer is just like codified racism right in front of you. And then you like look and you're like, I can't be reading this. And you look and you're like, this is a principal in a current role who leads 600 students, and this is what they believe about their students. And so like that to me is what it takes to like live out the principles of DEI, is taking the beliefs that you hold, then operationalizing them from start to finish, and excavating it in every single arena to make sure that the organization, the communities that you're building, you're co-creating actually reflect what you hope exists in the world, and like going there. And that includes like holding others accountable and yourself accountable, and like never finishing the work that you are doing.
Yeah, and I feel like, Asha, that's like leading right into a quick wrap up of like, what's the advice you give somebody, right? And maybe that's it, is to not be afraid of going there, as you put it, because I think it is really important to ask those hard questions. I want to open, and you can add to that. I don't want to put words in your mouth. Like, what is the advice that you would give somebody who is contemplating their next educational leadership move? What's your advice on holding high DEI standards, or just on startup in general? It's open to everyone.
I'll echo too. I think you need to know your values and what you're going to stay grounded on, and what you will not navigate away from, because there will be quite a bit of pressures pulling you in. And this is what I want at this school. And, you know, now you have all of these partnerships, and I want this piece and I want that. And I am very clear on my values and what we want to have happen at Las Palmas Leadership School for Girls. And so having that conversation when I'm sharing and being able to explain that to someone across the table that is saying, well, no, you need to have this for girls, right? And so once you're really clear on your values and it lives in your questions, I completely agree. In the interview process, the staff we have is the right staff. And we often say that we're going to go there, right? And so they understand, is it uncomfortable? Yes. And it should be uncomfortable, because the way we've been operating in a safe space was doing no justice for anyone. And so to operate in an unsafe, in a risk-taking but safe space, right, that we've allowed and created, to say, I don't know what I didn't know about gender. And I didn't realize I was creating these oppressive systems. But now that I know better, I will do better. And that is definitely one of our things that our staff is, we didn't know what we didn't know, but now that we know better, we're definitely doing better, because that's what our girls in our community deserve. So know your values and be very clear.
Love that.
We'd love to hear a sentence from everyone. If you've got that sentence of advice, one from everyone, it'll be a great takeaway for the listeners.
I will jump in. One of the things that resonates with me is just for folks to lead with audacious hope, right? So like, I have hope for the future. I am a futuristic leader, even in the midst of a pandemic, because I know on the other side of this is what is important for kids. And so to lead audaciously means like I am, and I'm going to tie this into advice from Jen last year's, like I have this righteous anger about like what's been happening in my community. And this is what drives me to do the work. And the work is hard. And yes, I recognize that. This is the conversation we have often with the staff. It's hard work and we do it anyway. We do it because we know what's on the line for kids. And so that would be my nugget of advice to folks is lead audaciously, hope audaciously, like remove those barriers. And if you can't move them, find the allies that will help you to do it.
Thanks, Terry.
I would have to echo Monica when I say have your non-negotiables and be your authentic self. I know, especially as women, whether you're a white woman or you're a woman of color, I think sometimes we go into spaces and we feel like we have to either act like a man or we have to act like someone else in order for people to accept and respect us. And so I would really say to be your authentic self, to be comfortable being uncomfortable, because this work is never comfortable. There is never a moment where you get to a place where you're like, I got this. This is wonderful. This is amazing. Then the pandemic hits and you're like, I guess this isn't great and wonderful and amazing. So getting to that point where you're comfortable being uncomfortable and doing those things that are hard. And then my last would be don't allow your book smarts to overrule your heart smarts, because I think going back to Asha's point is that sometimes you can read and you can study and you can take these things and not recreating wheels and saying, I'm going to do these things, but it ends up leading to perpetuating things that are not good for our kids. So just to know in your heart that this isn't good for kids, and it may be written in this book and it might be peer reviewed and it might be wonderful, but it may not be good for your babies.
Absolutely. I'm going to jump in and be my authentic self here and say I could not say any of what you all just said any better. So I'll leave all of the inspiration to you and just say I co-sign all of that. And I want to talk about tactics real quick, because that's where I live. And I think in like tactically speaking, one thing that I've learned the hard way is that when at all possible, you should manage someone to do something that you're an expert at, and then take on yourself the work that you're not an expert at, because chances are that is the work that you're going to have to do as the leader all the time. So for instance, in education, we have a lot of educators, right? And most of us, if not all of us here, were teachers before we became leaders and feel really comfortable being in that sort of academic instruction leadership space. That's where I was. I said, okay, I will be, when we launch, I will be the academic leader, and I'll hire an operations person to do all that other stuff that I don't know how to do. Turns out, as the system level leader, all that other stuff is my real work. There's like the bulk, not my real work. It's all my real work, but it's the bulk of my work. The bulk of my time is on the stuff that I would prefer not to be leading, but know that as a system level leader, I have to be, because it just presents itself. I think management is a lot easier in your functional area of expertise. I can manage someone to be a great academic instructional leader. I can't manage someone to be a great business manager, because I don't know anything about it, or I didn't at the time. But it turns out that's what I'd have to know. So if I could go back, I would have hired someone to be the academic instructional leader and manage that person really well. And I would have dived into the operations, the business management myself, because that was what I needed to get better at, and I needed to force myself to do it. So that's a tactic. And I think it's actually true across all different businesses, right? It's not just an academics thing.
Mm-hmm. That's great advice. Thank you. Go ahead.
So, I would challenge anybody. Somebody saw potential in me when they recommended this position. And so, I'm one of those dive right in, get to work, do it. And I would encourage anybody that's ever thought about doing this to do it. But what I've also learned in opening a school during a pandemic is find the bright spots, and you celebrate those accomplishments every time you reach that, because you get in the hard work of it and you're like, oh, you get frustrated. But when you look back and you just celebrate the small stuff, and you're like, hey, and now you look back and you go, hey, I did open a school during a pandemic. So, and we're doing great things. And so I just would say to all of you, if you ever think you got that internal battle, that celebrate what you're doing, because this isn't easy, but it's for kids. And so we just have to celebrate the small things, but they're really big.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, my piece of advice would be, or so two pieces. So one would be like the internal one. Like I think my recommendation would be to always keep doing like anti-bias work and excavating those biases within yourself. Anytime we're working in any role where we are serving others, who we show up to or how we show up is how our work plays out, is how we share in community with one another. And when we like often talk about dismantling something or wanting to see a different world, it begins with us. And so it's like the constant recognition that our own internal work around inclusion, around being anti-prejudice is never done. And so it's like constantly working on your own biases, rooting them out. It's uncomfortable work, it's hard work. And to me, like, I just don't think it ever ends. And it always needs to remain a priority, because if we don't excavate it, we bring that bias into our own work and then we just continue it on. And then my second piece of advice is like to go for it. If you don't go for it, you're already at a no. Like we will often convince ourselves that it's going to be a no, this person's going to say no, we're going to run into these 10 obstacles, and we will talk ourselves out of something versus actually going for it. Very often you will find a way, you'll figure out a way, you'll like climb a mountain, you'll like bust through doors, you will convince people who never thought they would ever change their minds. And so it's like taking the leap of faith and always taking it. And even if you get a no, even if somebody's perception of you changes, like you tried fighting for something that you deeply believe in. And so my second piece of advice is just to like, you got to go for it. Despite any obstacles, despite any voices in your head, you've got to go for it.
Yes, thank you. Did we get everybody? I think we did. We did it, Dalia.
Wow. Thank you so much. I mean, first of all, everybody tuning in, listening in, we have mountains of love for our teachers, for our school leaders, and for our new at-home teachers and school leaders, parents. Thank you so much, everybody. This is like everyone is doing so much to ensure that our children are loved on, that our children are thriving, and that our children are being supported through what has been an incredibly challenging year. Leaders, thank you so much for closing out your day with us. And really, I know you're not closing out the day because you're going to go do a bunch of other stuff. And this was just a break from that for your kids, for our kids. I am leaving this session so incredibly hopeful. As somebody who grew up here in San Antonio, these schools were not available to me when I was a student. I know they were not available to my parents when my parents were students or my grandparents. And so I am leaving with a heart full of hope and inspiration for our children, for what's going to be true for them in 5-10 years because of the phenomenal schools that are now available in San Antonio. The work that you're doing every day to fight, to be courageous, to get back up, to figure out how to make what's in your heart and in your mind, which you know is just for children, possible. So thank you so much. Thank you, Jen, for moderating. You always do a phenomenal job. Have a wonderful evening. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.